Before we get to the presentation, in the unlikely event of an emergency, you'll hear a fire alarm. An initial alarm will sound, and then this will be replaced by a whoop whoop noise. This means you need to evacuate. There are exits located there, there, and there. You'll be directed to Lang Park for the emergency meeting place. I'll now hand over to Bill.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. There was, as usual in today's digital age, there's a lot of information that flies quite fast. And somebody was showing me something about Madonna who was falling off the stage. In fact, she was pulled off the stage. And I was told that she gave a poor earnings performance result. And that's what caused it. So I am confident here today that you will not be pulling my cape and pulling me off the stage, because we are incredibly excited about the results that we're going to share with you this morning. The way in which we're going to do this naturally is I'll give you a little bit of an overview and some insights into what we're doing and what we're going to be saying here this morning. Stephen Rue, our CFO, will come up and give you the financial results and the highlights and a little bit more detail. I will come back up, we'll go through some more of the operational elements, and as I refer to it, we get Stephen to do the boring stuff, and I'm fortunate to get to talk about the exciting things. Naturally, we will have questions, or take any of your questions. I am joined by a number of the other executives in the company. They will help me with the detail behind this. We act as one team, and we will respond and answer like one team. Now, there are three common measures that we often use to talk about our progress, and these are the build of the network, naturally, the number of end users that we put on to that area to which we built, and of course, the amount of money that they pay through the RSPs to us in the form of revenue. And I'm really excited to say that when I look year over year, we look at the results year over year, you can see that we have at least doubled, in many cases more than doubled, the progress and the performance of the company. You can see on the top left there, the number of serviceable premises. These are where people are able to connect to the NBN, has more than doubled since last year. You can see in the top middle there, premises activated, or end user premises using the network, has almost gone to 2.5 times where we were last year. And of course, the amount of money that they paid to us is up to $64 million, and that is nearly triple where we were last year. Now, in this revenue, it's obviously a component of the number of end users that we have, that 322,000 that's on the chart, but it's also what they pay on a per month basis. And as many of you know, in our pricing scheme, it has a connection charge, an ABC, and then a CVC charge that's more associated with usage. And we have seen an 8% increase year over year, predominantly because of this usage. And I'm going to explain that after I come back up after Stephen's financial detail. Now, I put two other category of highlights on here. Naturally, as you all know, we did sign the agreements with Telstra and Optus, and while I won't talk about the details of those contracts, I'll talk about what it means to us in terms of our deployment and our rollout plan. And then finally, in terms of the progress of a new rollout approach, we will share a little bit more detail on that. In fact, just kind of at a high level, and I'll remind you again, I'm going to go into far more detail on a number of these things. But with these agreements concluded, we can now start to access the facilities. We can start to access some of the data that we need to be able to do the next stage of the build. I will caution you that because the agreements actually have conditions precedents associated with them, technically it's not our asset until those condition precedents are met, and there's a couple of those that are beyond our control, and you'd have to talk to Telstra to be able to understand where those are. But those, we believe, will adequately get resolved, and we will hopefully do that in the near term. Now, as far as the MTM design rules, as you know, we published late last year the schedule between now and June of 2016, which actually equates to about 1.9 million premises. And this is those that have already been complete, those that will be complete within that time frame, or those that will start construction in that period. This is the first time we've been able to put out a forecast that gives a high enough level of confidence to where our RSPs can begin to plan and prepare their marketing approach. We also, of course, have started construction on FTTN and FTTB, and I'll give you more update in a second. We've had a number of end user trials. We have a contract now signed with a major equipment supplier for our HFC network, And of course, we are on track for the commercial launch of our long-term satellite. And again, I will go into far greater detail on each one of these. Now, all of this has put us on a path to reach our goals, our midterm goals. And we refer to this as the year 2020, where we will offer universal access to everybody across the nation. We will connect more than 8 million of those premises to be generating a revenue that exceeds $4 billion a year. We will have a customer satisfaction level that's commensurate with the kind of high quality telecommunications services that the consumers expect from us. And of course, naturally, we're going to create an environment at NBN where we are the ideal employer of choice for the talent that exists across this country. Now, I know, again, we're going to go into far more financial detail. Stephen Rue, our CFO, is the best place to do that, and if I could ask Stephen to come up to share your information with them, please, Stephen.
Thanks, Bill. Good morning, everyone. I actually think this is the exciting bit, but never mind. It's really terrific to see you all here today, and thank you so much for your interest. As Bill has outlined, we are really, really pleased with the progress we've seen today as we continue to work towards delivery of high-speed broadband for all Australians and connecting at least 8 million homes and premises in the process. Today, I'm here to provide you with an overview of our key financial and operating metrics for the half year, some of which Bill has outlined in his opening comments. I intend to talk to a presentation which is on the screen behind me, but this presentation is also on our website. We've also prepared a more detailed half-year set of financial statements, together with the Director's Report, which is also available on our website. And we have received a clean audit review from the ANAO on these financial statements. So if I can turn to the presentation behind me and start with the summary financials for the half year. You can see the total revenue increased from 22 million in the first half of 13 to 65 million during the period to 31 December 14, with the growth continuing from both an increase in active customers and increased average revenue per user. Operating expenses for the 6 months ended 31 December totaled 562 million, or up 62 million from the corresponding half year. This growth in costs is to be expected and primarily is due to increased customer acquisition costs as customers migrate from the Telstra and Optus networks to the national broadband network. EBITDA was a loss of 497 million, compared with a loss of 476 million for the prior comparative half year. EBIT, or earnings before interest, for this half year showed a $776 million loss, up 131 million on the prior year. This EBIT loss largely reflects, its increase in EBIT loss largely reflects the non-cash depreciation of assets in use. Total assets stood at just under 11 billion at 31 December, up from 9.5 billion at 30 June and 7.7 billion at 31 December 13. During the half year, 446 million in cash payments were made in respect of net operating costs. 1.4 billion was spent on capex, and a net 145 million on payments for right of use licenses, primarily for the right to access Telstra's dark fibre ducts and exchanges. NBN Co received a total of 1.977 billion equity from the Commonwealth during the half year, and this takes total equity funding to 31 December 2014 life to date to 10.4 billion out of an aggregate government commitment of 29.5 billion. So with that summary, turning to revenue. Telecommunication revenue increased from 22 million in the first half of 13 to 64 million in the current half year. You can see in the chart behind me that the growth has been steady quarter on quarter. Fibre services continue to be the biggest contributor to revenue growth, accounting for 57% of telecommunication revenue. And growth in fixed line services will continue to drive revenue throughout calendar 15 as the footprint expands. The revenues from NNI, or network-to-network interface, and CVC, or connectivity virtual circuit products, continue to represent more than a quarter of total revenue, with growth driven by retail service providers connecting at more points of interconnect and dimensioning their networks to serve higher numbers of end users. We saw additional NNI revenue in the last 6 months following the completion of the 121 points of interconnect program. Revenue relating to interim satellite is contributing 6 million to revenue and is in line with the corresponding half year, with fixed wireless revenue increasing by almost 3 million. Now these revenues are clearly small compared to OPEX and CAPEX, but the growth trajectory is really encouraging and it signals an expectation for significant revenue growth as the rollout of network infrastructure accelerates. On the next slide, we can see that the total number of premises activated on the national broadband network increased from 210,000 at June 14 to more than 322,000 at December 14, and significantly up from 131,000 at 31 December 13. Fibre users accounted for 79% of activations, with almost 254,000 premises activated at the end of this half year, up from 80,000 at December 13. As of 31 December 14, we had 27,000 fixed wireless premises activated, compared to 6,500 in the previous December. And on the interim satellite service, there was over 40,000 premises activated at 31 December, down 3,500 from 13. But as we have stated in previous presentations, we expect to see a significant demand for our upgraded satellite product once the satellite is launched and services made available to RSPs for sale to end users. The weighted average ARPU, or average revenue per user, across all national broadband network technologies was $39 per month for the current half year, which was up $3 from 30 June 14. And this is due to the greater mix of fibre customers and additional CVC and NNI revenue. The overall ARPU consisted of $28 per user of AVC and CVC NNI of $11 per user. Despite the reduction in CVC price from $20 to $17.50 this February this year, we anticipate overall ARPU remaining at current levels for the full year. Regarding speed tiers, at 31 December 14, we saw 19% of fibre users on the 140 speed tier and 38% on both the 25.5 tier and the 12.1 tier. In fixed wireless, 74% of customers are on the 25.5 tier. And Bill will talk to these a little bit more later. And so to operating expenses. For the current half year, operating expenses, as I said earlier, were 562 million, compared with 500 million a year ago. The largest expense in terms of absolute amount and year-on-year growth was telecommunications and network costs. And if I can remind you, these costs relate directly to the operations of our network. They include costs to acquire a managed service backhaul, costs associated with accessing infrastructure such as poles and wireless base stations, interim satellite costs, and costs associated with disconnecting and migrating customers from existing networks to the national broadband network. The increase in cost, as I did say earlier, is due to the growth in expense from the disconnecting and migrating of customers, and we will naturally continue to see this increase in line with fixed line customer growth. Gross employee costs and employee numbers changed very little year on year. The fall in employee expenses you see in the chart reflects additional capitalisation of employee costs to various capital programs. If I can turn to premises serviceable on the next slide, we can see the progress that we really have made. Premises serviceable at 31 December was almost 749,000, and this is up 35% on June and nearly double that of a year ago. The growth in the half year represents a significant acceleration in the delivery of serviceable premises over run rates seen previously. We're extremely pleased with the significant momentum in the build program, delivering a greater number of premises serviceable each week to our RSP partners. And as Bill will talk to later, it reflects the importance we have placed in working with the construction industry, but also in developing superior processes within the company to deliver great outcomes for our customers and ultimately their end users. So now to capital expenditure. During this year, we incurred 1.433 billion in capital expenditure, which is an increase of 245 million over a year ago. The largest area of CapEx during the quarter was in the FTTX access networks. This amounted to 797 million and represents spend of 451 million on brownfields, 64 million on greenfields, 242 million on Customer Connect program, and 41 million of FTTN deployment activity. And as I've just said, there's been a significant ramp up in both the pace of build and in the success of the program to clear the backlog of premises not yet serviceable for end users. This is also seeing a quicker release of FSAMs to RSPs for sale and a greater percentage of premises within those FSAMs immediately serviceable. This half has also seen acceleration in the program to cable multi-dwelling units. So as a result, the significant increase in FTTX CapEx is really to be welcomed. Capital expenditure on the fixed wireless network of 145 million also reflects an ongoing increase in the rate of build, which continues to accelerate. And during the half year we've just had, a further 217 wireless sites were acquired and 157 base stations built ready for service. The satellite programs incurred 175 million of costs. This relates largely to milestone payments made for the build and launch of the satellites and work on finalising the construction of the 10 satellite ground stations across Australia, all of which are now complete. We expect the first of the 2 purpose-built communication satellites to be launched in the current calendar year. Transit network accounted for 125 million capex during the 6 months, with all 121 points of interconnect completed, as outlined earlier. But ongoing capex will continue as the network further dimensions for greater growth. And finally, common capex was 191 million for this period. And this primarily relates to our IT spend on operating and business support systems. This work will see readiness for multiple product deliveries as the multi-technology program is launched to our customers. Our total capex spend, life to date to 31 December, was 7.1 billion, split by category of spend as outlined on the pie chart on the screen behind me. On the left-hand pie chart, you can see that life to date, we have spent over 1 billion on the satellite program, 700 million on fixed wireless, and 1.1 billion on the transit network. The largest item within common capex is IT costs, totaling over 1 billion. And finally, costs incurred on FTTX life to date is 2.7 billion. When we add in the NPV or net present value cost of right of use licenses, represented as finance leases in our statutory reporting, or approximately 4 billion of assets, life to date property, plant and equipment and intangibles amounts to just over 11.1 billion, as you can see in the right hand pie chart. And finally for me, I would like to turn to our cost per premise metrics, or CPP. During recent months, a detailed review of cost per premise was undertaken. This work addressed both a definition of CPP and also measured actual costs incurred. This work was really important to better understand actual costs, but importantly to assist us in making technology choices into the future. In essence, costs incurred in CPP are those involved in building the network from the transit network to the in-premise activation, and it therefore includes the NPV of lease costs for ducts. Certain costs, it's important to understand, are excluded from CPP. So the most significant of these are IT costs, transit network costs, subscriber payments to Telstra or Optus, and of course operating losses. CPPs are what we will be holding ourselves to account for going forward. And FTTN and HFC CPPs will be measured using identical principles. So using the definitions of 31 December 14, NBN Co's life-to-date cost per premise for FTTP brownfields was 4316. For greenfields life-to-date it was 2780. And for fixed wireless life-to-date 3637. So on this next slide, we break out some components of cost per premise for FTTP brownfields, and these reflect life-to-date CPPs. So on brownfields, you can see that the LNDN component of CPP totals 2,119, Customer Connect 1460, and the NPV of Telstra Duckleys is 737. The LNDN component has fallen since June, but we do expect a small increase in coming months as we build more expensive FSAMs, particularly in Western Australia, which involves greater civil works. In greenfields, design and build includes Customer Connect, and this has fallen in the past 6 months, indeed continuing an 18-month trend. But this is largely due to ongoing cost efficiencies in greenfield MDU build. At 31 December, these costs contributed 1,616 to Greenfield CPP. The Greenfield CPP also includes certain temporary transit costs, which are largely temporary assets required to connect to the transit network. Over time, the need for these transit assets will reduce, and costs incurred to date will be spread over more premises, reducing the CPP. But at 31 December, the CPP for these costs were 1165 per premise. And on the next slide, finally, fixed wireless CPP. You can see at 31 December live to date, this consists of $2,996 in design and build costs and $641 in lease costs. And these costs overall have fallen over 2% since June. So with that, I would again like to thank you for your time and interest and hand you back to Bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. All right, so again, I just want to reiterate that when you look at our progress to date, doubling the homes to have a connection, more than doubling the number of end users on that network, and tripling the revenue. Now, the reason this is important is this translates into a much more of a greater RSP engagement than we've ever seen in the past. And if we think about them as resellers of our service, they are critical in this entire model. And I must say, I've witnessed the change myself. Last weekend, I was headed to the beach in the morning, but I was having my coffee in the newspaper in the morning. I kid you not, I was looking at an article that was about Optus talking about NBN, and NBN was prominently displayed. We get in the car, we're headed to the beach, and behind a bus that has iNet plastered all over it talking about NBN prominently displayed. We get to the beach, I hear a helicopter, behind it is this enormous banner, and we're all trying to read what it is as they do catch our attention, and is one of our other delivery partners talking about NBN. It is just so prevalent out there everywhere you go. We've heard commitments from a number of them that they are really pouring their effort into this. Some of them are still waiting until there's a bit more volume, but I think we have hit a tipping point to where this is really going to drive much harder, much faster than in the past. In fact, we've had 5 new RSPs sign up even over this period of time, and Foxtel was one of those. I think that signals quite a bit in terms of where the future is going to be. So, of course, if we think about these RSPs, they naturally are concerned about what is the end user experience out there. And I want to talk a bit about that. And the last time we were together 6 months ago, we talked about some of the issues that we had with installation and the poor experience that people were having. John Simon and his team have done a remarkable job at going in to address the service level agreements that we have. And week over week, we track these. We're on a conference call and a meeting looking at the progress for each one of these. And John Simon and his team have done a marvelous job where we see the improvements in SLA. In fact, we see the improvement in the number of held orders that's continuing to diminish. So people are telling us that the experience is getting better. We're focused on this issue and there's a lot more to do, but again, progress is real and the progress is good. Now, when these people have the connection, what's their experience? How are they using it? If you see on the left here, you can see, as you heard Stephen also say, the products that we're selling, 76% of them are at 25 megabits per second or less. And that's interesting because that's kind of holding steady for us. But on the right, when you look and you compare that bottom green bar to the top green bar, which is half year over half year, we've actually grown 8% in the average consumption by the end user. So this refers to an appetite that people have in terms of the digital age starting to emerge and doing things in ways that they hadn't done in the past. There's also some other things you can draw out of this about the change from mobile dongle. You see a little bit of an increase in terms of the mobile data on mobile devices, but predominantly when you look at it, it is the fixed broadband that is really seeing the increase in the stimulus in usage. So this is important as we think about building the momentum because we know that appetite is there. And let me take you through each of the 5 technologies of our progress that's being made, and I'll start with fiber to the premise, FTTP. So as you know, we have stabilized the rollout here, and I need to commend Greg Adcock and his team because he has done a remarkable job going out to redirect the delivery partners. It was almost in shambles, on the verge of collapse, and this team took it over. They worked with the delivery partners, they reconstructed the contracts. I mean, just as an example, we now have, for every area that we put out to bid, we have multiple bidders from the delivery partners coming in. We haven't had that in the past. We have a different construct to which we reward them that's performance-based. There is a competitive element for each of them. If one is not doing as well as the other, that threatens their market share if they win that bid. So there's a different approach that is helping stabilize the rollout that we have seen to date. In fact, the weekly outputs have doubled when we look at fiber to the prem. And let me just kind of go up for a moment above just fiber to the prem across all technologies. What we're seeing is the serviceable premises, that's the ability for customers to be able to connect, has gone from 5,600 a week, and that's kind of taken a weekly average rate, to over 10,000 right now. And in fact, when you look deeper at a construction metric that was used unfortunately across the company and across the public in the past at premises passed, that isn't something that we always refer to at the top level progress of the company, but it's important for Greg and his team to look at it as one step in the progress of constructing this network. That weekly rate now has gone up to 12,000 per week. So there's clear momentum and it is starting to scale up. When you look at the lead-ins, and this we've talked about a couple of times before, because of that focus that the company previously had with only premises passed, they were neglecting this issue of these lead-ins. And this is so important because I think it is one of the most significant elements of change from a customer experience point of view that we have made. So bear with me a second here, just to remind those that aren't familiar with it. When we talk about premises passed, that's just running the cable down your street. The next step after running that cable down your street is to attach what we call a multi-port. This is a distribution system that allows us to send lead-ins into each one of your houses, maybe 3 or 4 or 5, 6 homes that are within that general area. That multi-port has the lead-in that's attached to it that goes up to the side of the house. So the biggest problem, the biggest root cause that we had and the frustration people were experiencing was the RSPs would go out and start to sell that home that just has a cable going down in front of your home. Then we would try to send crews back to install the multi-ports. Then we'd send a different crew back to install the lead-in out there. And it would literally take months and heaps of confusion, multiple people involved. So we set out to address this and change this. And let me just give you a couple of statistics that symbolizes the tremendous progress that has been made. So last year, the percent of what we call service class zeros, just the cable running down the side of your street, at the time we declared that area ready for service, 31% of those homes didn't even have the multi-port in. They were just traipsing down the street. Now that's 16% as we stand here today. Now equally as important, even though you may have the other multi-port installed, the lead-in is really the biggest time consumer behind this stuff. And again, this is the cable that runs from the side of the street, the footpath, the pit and the footpath, up to the side of your home. Now, last year, the number of homes that we started to sell into only had less than 5% of lead-ins installed in them. Today, that's over 50%. And by June, we'll be over 70%. This is a substantial, significant improvement in the way in which the RSPs can sell. It means that we can get that customer connected faster. It means that we don't have to deal with a number of different construction crews going back to dig those lawns up and while the customer's waiting for service. It avoids the issue that is this transition factor of disconnecting your copper ADSL service as you try to move to an NBN service. So it is substantial. Greg and his team again have been centered on this, focused, and it's really starting to see the results. Now, equally so, with fixed wireless, we've seen a number of improvements. And I want to tell you that being a wireless guy for a couple of decades, this fixed wireless effort that we have here in Australia is probably one of the most advanced, sophisticated approaches to putting a fixed wireless technology in place. And the progress, again, has been solid. We've taken premises serviceable, doubled to 159,000. We've activated the users on that. In fact, it's tripled since last year to 28,000. There's 217 sites right now that have been acquired, and that's the most difficult, lengthy part of the build. And we have 157 base stations that are already ready for service. Now, the idea of this being one of the most state-of-the-art fixed wireless applications has done something extra for us. We have always capped and offered only a service up to 25 megabits per second on the fixed wireless, but because this is performing so well, we can raise the service offering up to 50 megabits per second without a degradation to any users, to any service, without capital investment to go out there. So John Simon and his team are looking at a new product offering in the fixed wireless space that will take us up to that 50 megabits per second level. We'll announce the timing of that in due course, but this is substantial, and again, it's a reflection of the engineers, the designers, and the people that have installed this network in the way that which they have that enables us to lift that speed up. So, when we look, therefore, at the next technology that has been around for a while, long-term satellite, we are scheduled to have service on this in the first half of 2016. The first bird is scheduled to go up this year. Now, it was scheduled to go up in July, and there has been a delay to the October-November timeframe, but I want to explain that a little bit. There's always a number of risks associated with anybody that is launching a satellite for service. Our manufacturer is a company called SSL in Palo Alto, California, that is doing a remarkable job. I mean, the progress that we have on both of these satellites, the test results have been fantastic. We're in the final stages of the first satellite to be ready to be shipped. Then we send it down to a different company called Ariane Space, and they're the ones that actually put it in a rocket and launch it up into the sky. And then there's a third company that what we call flies the birds, and they get it into the right orbital slots and make sure everything's all right. They extend the arms for the satellite powering, communication, those sorts of things. So it's 3 stages, if you will. In this second stage of the launch, to share cost of the rocket, you have a co-passenger satellite. So our NBN 1A is what we call it today, was scheduled to go up with someone else's satellite. The company is not important here, but they have not been able to manufacture according to the schedule that they had anticipated, and as a result, there is a delay in our launch. Now, we're fortunate, knowing that there are risks associated with this, that we have taken that into account, put the buffer in the schedule, and therefore the launch of the commercial service is not jeopardized, but there is a launch in terms of the delay itself. So now, going on to the first of the new technologies in the multi-technology mix, let me talk about fiber to the node. So here, construction is now underway in all of the 11 build trial locations that we have. This covers more than 200,000 premises, and it's across 2 different states. We will see the product release and go to market in the first quarter of the next financial year, which is this July to September timeframe of 2015. Now, the end user trial is ongoing. We're seeing fantastic results. We've published before what the results are that we're seeing. This is going to be a solid network that is going to give great speeds and a good experience for the consumer. Now, a component of FTTN is really FTTB. Often we refer to these 2 together because it's basically using the same technical approach. It's just that that copper length is much shorter in a fiber to the building. And this is progressing really well also. Design and construction is underway for 6,000 apartments across 3 different states. We're targeting 2,000 premises to be ready for service this year, or this quarter, which is really by the end of next month. And of course, the product release on this, therefore, is going to be imminent. Here again, speed trials, experiences is so positive for us. We're seeing a shift and an evolution around the planet of people really focusing on this, saying this is such a good product. It's such an easier way to install to get into the multi-dwelling units that exist. And I will tell you, it's interesting to me across Australia, you look at it and it's about a third of the residential homes are in fact in MDUs and apartments. So this is very important for us in terms of the technology. Now, this last technology, which is the 5th within the mix, is the one that I am most excited about. I am absolutely convinced that this technology is a technology of choice around the world with huge amounts of R&D constantly going into it. It is where we see companies now that go head-to-head with fiber to the prem carriers because this is a viable technology that will give amazing speeds. We announced here just recently that Dennis Steiger, the guy that we stood up to lead this effort for us, he and his team have aggressively gone out there, have found one of the top vendors in this space, Eris, and we have signed that deal to provide the bulk of our equipment as it relates to the CMTS that goes into our exchanges, as well as the modems that go into the customer prems. I want to talk a little bit about what this really means in terms of the speeds. I think there has been some confusion on what people can expect behind our HFC network. The cables that we are taking from Telstra and Optus are merely the transmission medium. We are going to upgrade the electronics that are associated with this, so it will not be what current users of the HFC networks across these 2 companies are experiencing. We are going to make sure that DOCSIS 3.0, this is the technology standard and the protocol that really focuses on data, is universal across the network. That is going to give us speeds that are fantastic. In fact, Dennis and his team have been conducting trials recently, and we have now seen 376 megabits per second coming down and 49 megabits per second going up on this DOCSIS 3.0 technology. Now, that's great in itself, but the good news behind this is that's not even using all of the spectrum bandwidth that's available on these coaxial cables that we will use. So that number will go up. And the good news does not stop there. That's only DOCSIS 3.0. DOCSIS 3.1 is going to take it to a far different level. We're seeing trials within the labs and other areas of other companies across the world that are demonstrating this thing can get up into the gigabit per second level. Again, that is fantastic. We see very few, in fact, I think we have 4 service offerings for gigabit per second today in the country. The fact that we're going to be able to do this with our HFC network, the fact that that HFC network is a far lower maintenance element than any of the other metallic-based copper delivery services is good news for the consumer. The fact that we're getting this asset virtually for free from these 2 carriers means that that cost per premise element on this super high speed, easy to maintain, good product is going to be good for the taxpayer. So I don't think HFC has been understood well enough to realize how great this is for us, for the nation, and again for our overall budget of building out this network. So there's going to be more to come on this, and I ask you to stay close because it is very, very exciting. Now, with all of these 5 technologies, all the progress that we've seen, I have to tell you, we are nothing without our people. And we focused on this as well. Brad Whitcomb and his team have done a marvelous job of saying we have to have a culture where people are inspired, where people feel that they can grow, they can develop, they can do something that touches the heart about what it is that they do. If you think about it, for all of us to change the nation here in the country to more of a digital nation, which is modernizing ourselves, which is enabling the small business owner to be able to have lower transaction costs, it's enabling people that don't have the money to afford to live in the center of Sydney to feel like at least they have the same access to education and commerce. These kinds of things our employees believe in. But we have to create the environment, again, to where they're going to be able to deliver. If you look at our systems and processes, they're continuing to change. There is a new direction in play. Our employees getting aligned around our strategic values, around our goals that I defined earlier, we're working together systematically in a different way. This element for any company, as I'm sure you guys can attest to, we as human beings love to solve issues. Often we don't really think about what the problem is. We jump to a quick conclusion on that. We go into solution mode. That causes rework. And that, quite frankly, has been a lot of the case of what's been happening over NBN since its inception. Equally so, people get into their silos and they try to solve problems what they think for the entire company needs to be done. And so you have multiple groups trying to do different things, often with different outcomes. By applying this BPE here, which is the Business Process Excellence that Brad and his team have put together, we're taking a Six Sigma DMAIC approach that crosses organizational boundaries, that deals with the facts, the inputs from the customers. We have trained now all of our senior executives across the company. When I think about what John Simon and his team have been able to do with improvements in the customer satisfaction, improvement in that customer experience, it's all Six Sigma DMAIC approach. When I think about what Greg has done with his team on fixing this lead-in issue, it's all done with Six Sigma DMAIC approach. And it goes on beyond there. Our IT people are looking at this to be able to fix it. It is fundamentally changing, and we can witness it on a week-by-week basis to create this kind of culture. So all of these things combined together is why we feel confident that we're on track to meet the expectations that we set 6 months ago. And as you can see, for premise serviceable, we will be at 1 million. For the number of customers or end users activated, we will be at 480,000. And for the amount of revenue that we will collect, we will be at 150 million. So it is important that we realize we are in uncharted territory. We are taking on a project of a magnitude that has rarely been seen anywhere in the world. We are off to a good start, but that does not mean that we won't have our challenges, we won't have our issues in front of us. We have to scale this business much greater than what we've even presented to you today, but we are committed to do just that. Now, I'd like to go to questions, and again, I have the management team here with me. I'll go ahead and moderate from the podium here. Who has the first question that I can take? Please.
Morning, Samir Chopra from Bank of America Merrill Lynch. I had three questions. First one is, do all the customers in fiber to the node to the premises, do they get switched across simultaneously, or do you need to keep sending a crew out every time one of the homes or one of the apartment owners wants to switch across to FTTN?
Once we build the network out, we'll take the lead in all the way up. So there's a mix of things. When we declare an area ready for service, you'll have homes that have everything installed all the way right up inside to what we call the network terminating device. You'll have some that have the fiber cable that's wrapped outside the home ready for that other last part of the installation. And then you'll have some that don't have the lead-ins that I was referring to earlier. So depending on which application that home has a slightly different process in terms of how quick it can go on. Only for those that have that network terminating device already installed in it, don't require any sort of NBN interaction. Now the RSPs have different solutions that they use when they offer up activation. They might send the final piece of equipment, there might be a self-install, or they may themselves dispatch one of their technicians to go out to finish the installation.
So do all the customers that are on that same node, so the fiber to the node, 200,000 customers, do they flick across in grade size? As in, customers don't get a choice, right? When a node is installed, do all the customers, do all the copper wires switch across?
No, so that's a gradual thing. So fiber to the node, that was fiber to the prem that I described, and a fiber to the node. Once Greg and his team stand the node up, they'll be from the pillars where all the copper lines come from our homes into a central point in the neighborhood. A little pillar is standing up on the footpaths. I'm sure you've seen them around your neighborhood today. Greg and his team will build a node that's next to that. They'll have the fiber coming in, and there'll be electronics within that. We'll run a cable from that pillar over into that node. That allows us to be able to take fiber into an electrical signal, tap into that copper that goes to your home and moves on. Today, it would be a manual process. You don't have to enter the home anymore, other than for somebody to plug into the first plate to install the modem. And today, NBN would need to dispatch somebody out to that node to say, I'm going to cut off the copper that goes to the exchange and then tie those two pieces together. Dennis Steiger is also our CTO, and he works advanced technology and we're looking at technology that will automate that process to where we don't have to have a truck dispatch to be able to do that.
Great.
But fiber to the node is a far easier, less disruptive approach to connection than fiber to the prem.
Thanks. Second question was, do you have to pay Telstra as you roll out satellite and wireless? I'm just trying to figure out what's the operating leverage in your business.
So that in terms of the PSA payments, no, on the fixed wireless sides, both the fixed wireless and the satellite, the copper remains there. Telstra's still going to maintain that copper.
And that 1.9 million premises target for June 2016, could you give us a sense for how much of that is premises serviceable, premises connected?
So again, that's only what we're using to say how fast the build is going. It's not an indication of what the end user activations will be. So it's just to give a sense for, will any of those 1.9 million be in the process of being built? Will it have already been built, and or has it already been declared for service? So it's not about the connections, it's just about the progress. Next question. Josh? Oh, sorry, was there somebody over here? Yep.
Josh. Annabelle Hepworth from The Australian. Firstly, I just wanted to pick, I've got two questions. Both are about the cost per premises issue. I think Stephen Rue mentioned that there's an expectation that cost per premises will in fact rise, perhaps driven by WA in the immediate future. I'd like a bit more detail on what's driving that. And I've got a second question on greenfields. I can ask that in a minute.
Yeah, hold off. Stephen, do you want to answer that?
Thanks, Annabelle. All I was referring to is the cost per premise in NBN can vary dramatically depending on the geography, the geology, how close houses are together, for example. The CPP is an average of averages. It just takes expensive bills together with cheaper bills. The mix of FSAMs that we are planning in the next 6 months happen to be in the more expensive areas where there are longer pieces of civil work. That's all. It's as simple as that.
Annabelle, your second question?
I've got a question just on greenfields. You said that it's looking a lot cheaper to...
Sorry, apologies.
Just on the greenfields, those cost per premises figures indicate that it is cheaper to do greenfields than it is brownfields. That's provisioned by NBN contractors, though. Would it be cheaper, in your view, and perhaps more efficient to open this up to greater private sector competition to allow the likes of the open networks and some of these other enterprises to build this?
Are you staying within the greenfields? Do you mean other
specifically
companies
on
like Opticom and things of
yeah,
that nature?
that's what I'm talking about. I'm asking if those companies, would there be competitive benefits or cheaper delivery if they were allowed to provide greenfields?
As long as, again, the issue around other people providing access into the greenfield area to a new development. The positive is, again, it brings infrastructure competition, and we're all for that. We're not trying to block that in any way at NBN. The negative is NBN is a pure wholesale player, and we open it up to all of the RSPs. Again, we're tracking at about 50 direct contracts that we have with other companies to resell the service. Those other companies that would come in to provide that don't have that. And typically their services are a little different. So we've heard from developers that from a preference point of view, they want naturally the lowest cost, but they have to think about who is going to buy that home and what kind of service and what kind of opportunity they're going to have. So naturally, they'd rather have something that is associated like with what NBN is providing. So there's a bit of a trade-off. Now, as you know, there's a policy framework being put together around how greenfields should be paid for as it relates to NBN, and we're talking about charges to recover some of the infrastructure costs that will be borne by both the developer and the RSPs. And so that is going to make these other companies, the business model, a little bit more attractive to be more competitive. Josh?
Josh Taylor from NBN. Just a couple of questions also on cost per premises. What is the ideal cost that you would be looking at for a cost per premises passing in a brownfields area? And how do you sort of decide which sort of technology you will use based on that?
Ideal cost.
Zero.
So Josh, I'm not sure what you're asking here in terms of what we think it could be. Is that?
I guess my question is around, so you come up with this 4,367 figure for the brownfields, and it's, it's so high, but it's not really, we can't really put it in context with anything else. It's not really clear to say, well, this is what we want to get it down to, and this is how we'll decide what technology we use.
Well, no, okay, I see. And again, I think it's important for us to keep this in perspective a little bit too. When Stephen first arrived, I can recall a conversation saying, Stephen, I'm not sure what the cost per premise really is, because I've seen all sorts of different numbers that are coming about that people have almost different definitions. So he felt the same way, and he had the same reaction, and so that's why he's been working on with the team that we've even had a third-party accountant look at to make sure that they can validate our logic behind coming up with these numbers. The problem is when you start looking at it on a trend basis. So as Stephen was demonstrating on the slides, we wanted to give a perspective of what it was like in 2013 and what it was like now. And trust me, that's not about old government and new government. That is just to be able to show that it has not changed as material as people think. Now you're going to have flows that are going to come down and or up, and I want to explain that because this is important. As productivity gains, efficiencies, new designs, innovation, and all of that comes into play, that has a natural cost on a like-for-like basis of coming down, and Greg and his team they've introduced a number of things to be able to do that. But you can't look at these numbers on a life-to-date basis and draw that out completely, because if you think about simplex and complex, so imagine your home, Josh, is way out in the bush with some very difficult terrain to get into. We can't plow up the streets, we can't pull through the ducts because there's a time slot window of only 2 hours, and you have a far longer length to go. It's, again, more complex, you gotta take out more trees or whatever it is. Where mine is just right next door to the exchange or to the FSAM, and it just pops in very quickly. So clearly my CPPs are gonna be a lot less than your CPP, and that mix of, I'll call it the extremes of complex to simplex, will always change because it depends on the path, what we're going down. We don't pick all of the expensive ones first and do those. It's not the way we work. So you're going to see that cost per prem move over time, and we'll be transparent with that, of what that really is. But be careful to draw any conclusions about one period over the next because of that issue.
And just to sort of follow up on the estimates hearing the other day, you mentioned that NBN Co didn't seek maintenance costs from Telstra for the copper network, and I just wanted to clarify whether that was accurate or not, or whether you did due diligence on the state of the copper network as part of the negotiations.
I'm not aware of any Telstra handing over what the cost of their copper maintenance is. Greg, I think you also answered that we didn't have that information. It wasn't a part of the deal they have to give that to us. We have certain parts of the deal that they have to give us certain bits of information, but it's not what their historical costs have been. Is there a question over here?
No, webcast. On the webcast.
Oh, sorry, on the webcast, thank you. So there are a number of people on the webcast, forgive me, and I will take alternate questions from here on out. This one is from Raymond Tong. The question is, can you share what your fiber ARPU, AVC, CVC is for the first half of 2015? Stephen, have we broken that down to the product lines?
I don't have it here, Bill.
We do, Raymond, I don't think there's a problem with giving it to you. If you contact our PR group, I'm sure that they can help you with some of that. The second question that he has is, will NBN be building out fiber to the basement to MDUs already serviced by existing FTTB infrastructure? So the answer is yes, we will. We are going to provide a universal broadband access. We will compete with anybody that's out there. We take the earning a return on our taxpayer money quite seriously. We will naturally look at the economics of how that would be constructed, but the intent is we're going to build this thing and offer a wholesale service that people are going to prefer.
Okay.
That's right.
Hi, Bill. Two quick questions. I want to follow up on the greenfields. Opticom's been asking NBN Co for an interconnect arrangement and also for standardized OSS/BSS services so that it is easy for RSPs to pick NBN Co or other guys in the greenfields. How are you looking on that?
Well, yeah, so at this point, we've not started any of those developments. Our focus on our developments, as you can imagine, is around building out our FTT and our HFC systems to take greater priority. So at this point, that would be a major directional change for us to redirect our IT group. So our focus is building out the network and covering the premises and servicing our customers, the RSPs.
That makes sense. Commercially, is it something that you would consider?
I think there's lots of things we could consider, but in terms of prioritising and getting bang for buck, it probably isn't on the top list.
Thank you very much. The second question was maybe for Stephen. It was about the CVC charge. That's clearly making up a lot of your revenues. We had IONET CEO David Buckingham just the other day saying it was woeful, I think, from memory. And even though there is obviously a glide path down for it over time, he was saying that's not going down fast enough. How much wiggle room have you got in the budget for reduction to that? I know that you're currently considering it, as I understand it, the options for the charging model would all keep the revenue consistent, just a different split between ABC and CVC.
Yeah, it might be better, John, if you want to.
Yeah. So in our pricing model, obviously we've got a two-part pricing model. One is the ABC for effectively the port, and the other one is reflects that usage grows. Clearly, the CVC is a proxy for usage, and we've got to balance that up. So we reduced the CVC price from $20 recently to $17.50. We're also going through a further review, working with our RSPs and our own review, to make sure that we basically have a mechanism in place that gives some level of security for the market, the RSPs, but also reflects that as usage grows, that we've got the right mechanism in place to balance out the right type of outcomes for us. So we're well aware that the last thing we want is that we pick up revenues and drive the RSPs out of business. That's not the intent. But at the same time, we want to make sure that there's a balancing act that is delivered to manage the usage growth that we will see. And so, but at this point, we're at $17.50, and we'll keep on reviewing that as we go forward.
All right, going back to the webcast here from David Copper. Has NBN undertaken an exercise to project the CTP over the life of the project and the expected operational life of the technology to determine if NBN expects to stay within the financial targets and company viability for IRR? I think Stephen Conroy asked this question at the Senate estimates. And David, as most people are aware, the company's MTM mix and the current model to which we're operating on was based on the strategic review that was done late 2013. As we bring in these new technologies, we learn more information to be able to study the actual cost, and that's a bit why Mr. Rue was talking about the current CPP elements. We are also obligated to provide to the government on an annual basis a corporate plan that reflects a multi-year projection of our cost. NBN and its managers are going through a process right now in building that plan based off a lot of the assumptions made in the strategic review and the actuals that we have life to date to be able to update what that plan might look like. The schedule on that is that we will have a board-approved element that will go before the government in the May-June timeframe. The government then assesses that to see what they want to change, like, dislike, whatever the case may be, and then that in turn is given back to the board of directors of NBN for direction on which way that we should start executing. So work is underway on that. That'll be part of the corporate planning process, and we will have, therefore, the questions that you've asked answered. Whether that makes it into public opinion will be a matter for government, not for NBN.
Hello, Alex Zaharov-Reutt from iTWire. On Tuesday, Steve Perlman's Temas Networks in the US demonstrated its LTE and Wi-Fi compatible P cells, and which was demonstrated to have at least 35 times spectral efficiency over LTE, which thus allows many more LTE users to get mobile fiber speeds, which is how it's been described. It was demonstrated a year ago, and on Tuesday they published a 99-page white paper explaining how it works, and announced that in San Francisco, via a license from Dish Networks, it would be installing this network. Even though it's very high density, they'll all be getting mobile fiber-like speeds over their mobile phones, existing LTE-compatible phones. So the question is, has NBN Co heard of it, and are your technicians all over it, and are you looking to install it in Australia ASAP? Because I'd certainly love to use it, and mobile fiber is very appealing.
Let me ask our CTI, Dennis Steiger, to first respond, and then I'll attempt something as well.
I'm going to attempt something right now. Yes, we have heard of it. It is a new and developing technology. And we've actually asked our CTO office to have a look at it, see what the potential applications are. And quite honestly, there are a number of things that come like this every month that we look at. Some of them make sense, some of them don't. But this is one that we are currently looking at.
And I will say there is a lot of activities that we are studying and reading about people that are trying to take LTE and put it, I think it's LTE-EU, right, over Wi-Fi spectrum, which is not private, the public spectrum, and seeing what they can do in terms of the enhanced data speeds. There's also a lot of technology evolution to be able to extend the range. Wi-Fi, as we know right now with power levels, it's quite limited in the distance. There's also a lot of research looking to be able to extend that. In my particular view, I do not believe that this is any threat to the NBN business model. In fact, we embrace the fact that more people are going to want to be portable with what they use, and there will always be a role, in my view, for wide area wireless networks such as the Telstra's, Optus, and Vodafone's that are here in the country today. But we're going to see more portable Wi-Fi hotspots using this newer technology, this more innovative approach to things, to where when people are out with their devices, they can still use a fixed wireline supported Wi-Fi type access approach. But again, we're not opposed to that. We don't view it as a model threat at this point, but we're following it closely.
Thank you.
Back on the web, so this is from Jed Salmon. Given the fluctuations in the cost per premise, how does NBN decide what technology to roll out to a particular area, for example, FTTN as opposed to FTTP? Steve, you want to talk about fluctuations?
Sure. So, when we look at what technologies we use, we look at a range of things. We look at cost. But we also look at revenues in the areas. We look at net present value of that particular build. We look at paid cash. We look at underserved areas. And obviously, but then we look at operational issues as we get on the ground. So there's a variety of factors that we look at, one of which is cost per premise.
All right, thank you. In the room? Yes, please.
Richard Churton, Register, looking at the looking at your forecast out to June, just June this year, you're expecting another 158,000 roughly activations, 284,000 growth in serviceable. I presume that it is still too early to be to be factoring in much impact from FTT, from fibre to the basement or node, and from the HFC. When do you expect those technologies to make much difference to, or to impact the makeup of your growth in serviceable and activations?
Yeah, thank you, Richard. I mean, those are really two things. Those two technologies, the FTTN and even the FTTB and the HFC, those components are going to help us hit the scale that we need to get universal access by 2020. The current financial year results and the projections have nearly nothing in those numbers to be able to reflect that. So your question about when, so we'll see, there'll be a little bit of FTTB, I want to be careful in this financial year. But the real change will occur in the next financial year, FY16. We'll see FTTB, we'll see FTTN, we may see HFC, but again, I don't want to commit to that at this point. We still have a number of other hurdles to look at, to assess, to determine exactly when we can expect the commercial services and significant launch with them. All right, back on the net is Kenneth Sang. He asks, in the FTTN and FTTB footprint, does NBN intend to service voice-only customers, and will everyone be asked to migrate to the VDSL network? So in FTTN and FTTB, naturally we will have a voice-related product, and John, you can speak to this a little bit more detail. So we don't see any anticipation of that person, that premise, that just wants to use a voice-based product.
That's correct, Bill. So basically, at the end of the day, it's the RSPs that combine the voice capability with their CPE. But what we're doing is releasing an IP level at the layer 2 Ethernet bitstream product through FTTN, we're capable of providing both voice and data services.
And the disconnect is very similar to that of FTTP, in that customers will given a time frame to migrate.
Correct. So there's still an 18-month migration period, after which that migration period is completed, the disconnection proceeds.
Back in the room, David?
Hi, sorry. Quick question. I know you haven't started on the HFC and FTTN to a great deal yet, but given the nature of the technology, do you expect the take-up rates to be much faster or higher than FTTP? You know, there's going to be one technology, one line.
John, you want to talk about penetration rates?
At this point, we're not planning for a faster or higher take-up rate. I mean, we see the take-up rates occurring and we've modelled that through. Obviously, until we actually release and go to some level of scale for FTTN or HFC, we won't really know. But at this point, we are seeing the take-up rates that we need to get to over the 18-month migration period occur. We've gone through a disconnection, working closely with Telstra in something like 20 fibre serving areas. So at this point, our modelling assumptions just continue with the take-up rates that we've seen on fibre to premise. We don't believe there's a fundamental difference here. At the end of the day, most end user premises they're oriented around the technology, they want the service. And what we're providing here with our customers is a service, not whether it's actually a fibre, a piece of copper, or a piece of coaxial. What they want to know is, what is it capable of doing and what are the benefits I get? And so it's only a very small percentage of the end users out there in Australia who really are strong on a particular type of technology. The average mum and dad at home just want the service.
And just a second question, in terms of the new construction deals over FTTN, the new contractors, how far away with them getting some movement on that?
You mean outside of what is currently being done in our trial areas?
Yeah, David, sorry. We're currently in negotiations, and whilst we're doing the construction trials at the moment that everyone knows about, we're looking to start to scale that up towards the end of this financial year, so you can join the dots around how far away the contracts are.
And back on the net, Jed Salmon again, he's asking for FTTN. Given that it utilizes existing copper infrastructure, can we please describe whether end users will still need to install specialized NBN equipment inside their homes, and whether NBN will still need to access consumer premises to perform further works? This is an issue of the modem that's going to go out there, and it's going to be managed by the retail service provider. NBN should not need to go onto the customer premise at all, unless there is a problem, of course, with the copper facility getting up there. All right, so with that, if I could just offer closing comments. Again, the last thing that we would want to do is come up here and tell you that everything is solved and we're fine to be able to reach the goals that I set before you. What, if anything, I would like to do is assure you that we have people, we have innovation, and we have the heart and minds behind this to deal with whatever obstacle gets thrown our way. We are committed to making sure that we change the digital face of the country. We believe that the technology to which we are deploying will do just that. We will do everything we can to stay within the confines, within the parameters that have been given to us, and I hope that we can continue to have the kind of results that we have seen in this first half. We feel good about that, but we know there's a long road ahead of us.